It's 1928 in Colombia. Cruise ships are docked all along the country's Caribbean coast, with American tourists enjoying endless days in the tropical sun. But below the surface, trouble was brewing. It all started with 25,000 workers who, unlike the foreign tourists, had had enough of the sun, the heat, and their never-ending work. These men had been worked to the bone. They had no days off, no medical care, and their salaries? Nothing more than scraps. They were sick of being treated like slaves, and in their minds, it was time to make their voices heard. Little did they know what the consequences of that would be. November 1928. Thousands of workers go on strike. They refuse to work. They gather in the streets, calling for their employers to listen. And no matter what their bosses do, they don't come back to work. The strike continues for 2 whole months. Then finally, the mayor of the town gives in. He calls for a gathering with all the workers to discuss putting an end to the strike. Finally, the workers think they've won. So thousands of Colombian men, women, and children gather in a town called Cienega, waiting for the mayor to start negotiations. But he never does. He didn't invite them over to talk about working conditions. That was never the plan. And all those thousands of hopeful Colombians, they had just walked straight into an ambush. As the sun sets below the horizon, the strikers get nervous. Wasn't the mayor supposed to appear already? What was going on? And that's when it happens. A loud voice rips through the air. "People, disperse, we will open fire." Some of the strikers disperse and flee into the night, others decide to stand their ground. But what they didn't know is that they were surrounded by Colombian soldiers deployed by the president himself to make the problem go away. Seconds feel like hours. In reality, only a minute passes between the soldiers' warning and the first shot going off. And what followed was a bloodbath. Colombian soldiers with automatic weapons opened fire on the people from above. The screaming and crying can be heard from miles away as the Colombian military massacres its own people. Between 50 and 2,000 people died that night, but we'll never know the real number because by sunrise, only 9 bodies are left in the town square, 1 for each of the workers' demands. The rest of the bodies have been carted off and were buried in mass graves that remain a secret to this day. The bosses had gotten what they wanted, and the message was clear. Go on strike and you die. But what had all this bloodshed been for? Diamonds? Oil? Gold? Oh no, thousands of people had died over something far simpler. Bananas. And the company that got the president to order a massacre of its own people? It wasn't some evil Colombian cartel. It was the United Fruit Company. Yes, an American banana company ordered the massacre of its own workers. For almost 100 years, the United Fruit Company had the banana industry in a chokehold. For nearly a century, it controlled 90% of the banana markets and everything the industry needed to get those bananas from South America to the US. We're talking trains, boats, land. It was all owned by this one company. By the early 1900s, the United Fruit Company or United Fruits owned land in almost every banana-producing South American, Central American, and Caribbean country. We're talking Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica. They were all United Fruit territory. And after just a few decades, United Fruit has so much money and so much land that they basically ran the countries they were in. Presidents, dictators, politicians all had to bow down to their every whim. Even the American government couldn't say no. But how? How did a banana company of all things accumulate so much power? What was it about a piece of yellow fruit that could turn dictators into puppet leaders and the leader of the free world into just another yes man? The answer, as always, was money. But to understand how United Fruit grew into one of the most influential businesses in history, we'll have to travel back in time. Back to when bananas weren't just a healthy breakfast food, but an exotic commodity that people couldn't get enough of. My name is Jake Tran. I make documentaries on money, power, war, and crime in my team. Subscribe for more. If you want to win $1,000 cash, you just have to be following me at Jake Tran and you're automatically entered. A few of you have won already. Watch out for fake accounts. I will never message you asking for money. And this is the United Fruit Company.
I'm Chiquita Banana and I've come to say bananas have to ripen in a certain way. And when they're flecked with brown and have a golden hue, bananas taste the best and are the best for you.
Giant corporations like United Fruit have a lot of debts. We don't know the interest rate on that debts, but what we do know is that drowning in high interest debt like credit cards really holds you back in life. But what if there was a way out? What if instead of being shackled by high interest debt forever, you could get a new loan at a smarter interest rate, use that new loan to pay off your high interest debts, so you're left with only one fixed monthly payment with a clear payoff date. Imagine the weight that would be lifted off your shoulders if you could do that. Well, you're in luck because that is where Upstart comes in. Upstart is a fast and easy way to get a personal loan that only requires one fixed monthly payment with a clear payoff date that you can use to pay down your high interest debts. Everything is done online with easy to understand payment terms, so you'll know exactly how much you'll be paying and for how long. Over 1.8 million people have already used Upstart to pay off their credit cards, fund a personal expense, or consolidate high interest debts. The amazing thing about Upstart is that they consider factors other than just your credit score. Upstart looks at things like your income, employment, and other information to get you a smarter rate for your loan. Your loan offer could range from $1,000 to $50,000, and you can check your rate in minutes without hurting your credit score. If you end up getting a loan, you can have access to the funds in as little as 1 business day. You can check your rate without impacting your credit score right now by going to upstart.com/JakeTran. Be sure to use my URL to let them know we sent you. Loan amounts would be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. That's upstart.com/JakeTran to check your rate today. Thanks to Upstart for sponsoring this video.
This is Minor C. Keith. Back in the 1870s, he was in charge of building a railroad from the capital of Costa Rica to one of its coastal points. Unfortunately, the Costa Rican government ran out of money before the railroad was completed, so Keith had to ask foreign banks and investors to keep the project going. In exchange, the Costa Rican government gave Keith a 99-year lease for 800,000 acres of land. When the railroad was finally up and running though, Keith ran into another problem. He didn't have enough passengers for the rail to be profitable. He didn't even have enough passengers to cover his debt. To keep construction costs low, Keith had been planting banana trees as a source of food for his workers, and that's when a new idea struck him. What if he could import bananas to America? Americans weren't used to eating these yellow fruits on a daily basis, but what if they could be? From the very first shipment, his business plan was a massive success. Now, instead of waiting for passengers to fill up trains, he piled them high with bananas on their way to eager North Americans. And with all the land he got from the Costa Rican government, it wasn't long before Keith dominated the banana industry. But it didn't end there. This is Lorenzo Dow Baker. Like Keith, Lorenzo also started importing bananas to America in the 1870s, only his bananas came from Jamaica. Both Keith and Lorenzo's businesses were insanely profitable, but the two men realized something even more important. Together, they could take their two separate banana companies, merge and monopolize the entire industry. If they pulled together their money, they could buy out every competitor and become the biggest, baddest banana company on the planet. So that's exactly what they did. So in 1899, Keith and Lorenzo's companies merged to form the United Fruit Company. Almost immediately, United Fruit started buying out other banana exporters and producers. And if they couldn't buy them out, they would buy as many shares in each possible, so that no matter who was planting or exporting, United Fruit would always profit. But it didn't end here either. United Fruit wasn't just happy with controlling the banana production industry, they wanted a cut of everything involved in moving bananas from South America to the US. So the company went on a buying spree. Railroads, trains, ships, and even telegraph companies were acquired as subsidiaries. Even the hospitals that treated injured or sick workers were owned by United Fruit. United Fruit was profiting from every single step in the banana business, and they had more money than they knew what to do with. But not even this was enough. They wanted more control. They wanted assurances that their cash cow couldn't just be taken away from them at a moment's notice. And to do that, they'd have to climb even higher on the ladder than ever before, right up to the presidents and governments who ran the countries they so easily exploited. If there was one thing United Fruit knew well, it was that money in a poor country gives you limitless power. After years of being exploited by the Spanish, and then going through endless wars after gaining independence, most South American, Central American, and Caribbean countries were really poor. So, when the representatives of United Fruit came to South America dictators and presidents offering massive amounts of money in exchange for land, it was an easy yes. Here were Americans offering millions in exchange for leasing land to plant bananas. What was the harm in accepting? Plus, once these banana farms were up and running, thousands of South Americans would be offered jobs. It was a win-win situation. Or at least, that's what they thought. Whether United Fruit bribed, convinced, or threatened governments into selling them land, the end result was the same. By 1930, the company owned over 3.5 million acres in Central America and the Caribbean. At one point, United Fruit was the single largest landowner in all of Guatemala. And here's where things got interesting. With so much land under their control, United Fruit basically had complete control over the country's economy. You see, United Fruit could decide how many workers to employ, how much to pay them, and even how much money they wanted to share with the country they occupied. And since there wasn't any land for competitors or small businesses to use, no one could really stop United Fruit from demanding all sorts of concessions in exchange for not tanking the economy. But here's the thing. Even if these governments cooperated, little to none of the money United Fruit made would ever really make its way to the people. Instead, it all went to the foreign investors and the company's owners. It was this total domination of South American politics and economy by United Fruit that eventually led to these countries being called banana republics. And with money, power, and influence on the line, the United Fruit Company didn't care who it got into bed with. They worked with General Rafael Trujillo, who took control of the Dominican Republic by force and murdered anyone who stood in his way, the Somoza family of Nicaragua, who were just as bad, Marcos Jimenez, the dictator of Venezuela known for his brutal secret police and stealing more than $200 million from his own people, and even Miguel Mendez, the president of Colombia responsible for the orders to kill the banana workers in 1928. With so much power and so little care for the people and countries they were exploiting, the Banana Massacre of 1928 didn't come as much of a surprise. From Gray in Bogota, Colombia, to Secretary of State in Washington, December 5th, 1928. I have been following Santa Marta fruit strike through United Fruit Company representative here, also through Minister of Foreign Affairs who on Saturday told me government would send additional troops and would arrest all strike leaders and transport them to prison at Cartagena. That government would give adequate protection to American interests involved. Martial law was declared today. I shall see Minister again in the morning and report developments, if any. December 6, 1928. Martial law in Banana Zone in Santa Marta Province declared by Colombian government last night. Demonstrations against the government were held and broken up by the few soldiers in Santa Marta. Feeling against the government by the proletariat, which is shared by some of the soldiers, is high, and it is doubtful if we can depend upon the Colombian government for protection. May I respectfully suggest that my request for the presence within calling distance of an American warship be granted, and that it stand off subject to my call, and that the United Fruit Company wireless stations in Santa Marta call letters UJ be used as we are without telegraphic communication, and there is no other means of communication with Santa Marta. It is admitted that the character of the strike has changed and that the disturbance is a manifestation with a subversive tendency. December 7th, 1928. Situation outside Santa Marta City unquestionably very serious. Outside zone is in revolt. Military who have orders not to spare ammunition have already killed and wounded about 50 strikers. However, I have now before me original telegram sent today from Governor to the President saying, Santa Marta City completely quiet and railroad traffic restored as far as Cienega. Government now talks of general offensive against strikers as soon as all troop ships now on the way arrive early next week. I am concerned about some 20 Americans still in outside zone and hope to learn they are in safety before any much offensive begins in view of danger otherwise of possible repercussions on them. December 7th, 1928. The legislation at Bogota reports that categorical orders have been given the local authorities at Santa Marta to protect all American interests. The department does not, repeat, not, desire to send a warship to Santa Marta. Keep the department informed of all developments by telegraph. December 9th, 1928. Troop train from Banana Zone just arrived in Santa Marta with all American citizens. No Americans killed or wounded. Guerrilla warfare now continuing in the zone, but military forces are actively engaged in clearing the district of the communists. As all danger to American citizens is now past, I shall not continue to report by cable, unless you wish me to do otherwise. December 11th, 1928. Referring to my recent reports concerning the strike of the banana workers in the Santa Marta district, and with special reference to my telegram number 187 of December 10th, 5 p.m. on that subject, I have the honor to report that, according to the latest information made public, the number of strikers killed by the military forces during the recent disturbances was something over 100, while the wounded reached 238. December 29th, 1928. I have the honor to report that the legal advisor of the United Fruit Company here in Bogota stated yesterday that the total number of strikers killed by the Colombian military authorities during the recent disturbances reached between 500 and 600, while the number of soldiers killed was 1. Your obedient servant, Jefferson Gaffery. January 16th, 1929. I have the honor to report that the Bogota representative of the United Fruit Company told me yesterday that the total number of strikers killed by the Colombian military exceeded 1,000. June 8th, 1929. I have the honor to report that the manifestations against the government of yesterday and the day before were conspicuous for the number of inscriptions carried by manifestants relating to the fruit workers' strike, denouncing the government and especially General Cortez Vargas for the manner in which the strike was put down. Also, skeletons and skulls adorned with bunches of bananas were freely displayed. All the Colombian strikers had wanted was fair work conditions, insurance, compensation for workplace accidents, clean dormitories, 1 day off a week, a minimum pay rate, and better hospital services. But for the United Fruit Company, this was as good as treason, punishable only by death. There was only one problem. The massacre in Colombia had damaged their reputation. Bananas were supposed to be healthy, delicious, guilt-free fruit brought from a tropical paradise. No one wanted blood bananas. So to reinvent its public image, United Fruit made a really weird investment. It created the biggest privately owned fleet of ships in existence. In the late 1920s, United Fruit launched its most impressive PR campaign yet. They created the Great White Fleet, dozens of white steamships designed to carry bananas and people between the US and South America and the Caribbean. You see, to make up for all the rumors of banana-related deaths, United Fruit had to do a little rebranding. So they started taking passengers on banana cruises. These cruises would transport Americans from their cold, gray cities and towns to the warm, bright, happy islands and countries controlled by United Fruit. The cruises were designed to get everyday Americans to see that, wow, the bananas I eat come from such a happy, ethical place. They painted a picture of a tropical paradise where workers loved planting and harvesting bananas almost as much as Americans loved eating them. Tours of plantations would specifically visit areas that were set up like a movie scene with smiling workers in the background, looking like they're having the time of their life. All the while, the real exploitation happened behind the scenes. Decades later, North Korea would take a page out of United Fruit's book with their curated tours of North Korea. And as unbelievable as it may sound today, it worked. By having Americans give first-hand accounts of the exotic and mysterious lands the bananas came from and how happy the locals were, United Fruit managed to fool its biggest market into believing they were the good guys. By buying bananas, they weren't just making United Fruit rich, they were helping poor, uneducated people live better lives. Or at least, that's what United Fruit wanted them to think. By the early 1950s, United Fruit was peaking. It controlled millions of acres of land. It was worth millions of dollars, and there seemed to be no end to the global demand for bananas. Almost every major politician and lobbyist in America owned shares in United Fruit, which meant not even the American government would lift a finger to stop their ruthless climb to the top. But then they ran into trouble. You see, for years, United Fruit had been using the Guatemalan land it owned as a way to control the Guatemalan government. They didn't use or need all that land to grow bananas. So instead, they kept it as a sort of bargaining chip, something to hang over the government's head and remind them who really held all the power. But then, Jacobo Arbenz became president in 1951, and suddenly, all of their power and control was under threat. Jacobo Arbenz was a devoted nationalist, so for him, a foreign company owning the majority of Guatemalan land didn't sit right, so he announced a new plan. Every acre of unused land United Fruit owned would be seized and redistributed to the poor. For years, poor farmers had been suffering, with no land to grow their crops and no way to make money. No more. With Arbenz in power, all that empty farmland would be given back to the people. Arbenz even offered to pay United Fruit the $630,000 that they had said the land was worth on their tax evaluation, but United Fruit wanted none of it. To United Fruit, this was an act of war. Their power, money, and future relied on a monopoly where no one could compete with their banana production. What would happen if some poor farmer suddenly started his own banana company? Oh no, this Arbenz guy had to go. Luckily for United Fruit, they had some friends in very high places. And with Dwight Eisenhower officially becoming President of America in 1953, the company finally saw their chance to bring a little regime change to the Guatemalan government. Under Eisenhower, two men would rise to power who would change the history of not just Guatemala, but dozens of other countries forever. These two men were John and Allen Dulles. John Dulles, the new Secretary of State, had actually helped United Fruit create its Guatemalan land monopoly, and his brother Allen, as the new director of the CIA, he was in the perfect position to further United Fruit's interests. Even America's ambassador to the UN owned a massive amount of United Fruit stock. Translation: decision makers in the US government had a lot to lose if Guatemala seized all that banana land from United Fruit. So, just like the CIA had done in Iran the year before in 1954, Eisenhower approved Operation PB Success. It started by painting Jacobo Arbenz as a communist and causing chaos among the Guatemalan people. A few months later, Carlos Castillo Armas invaded with the backing of CIA training, weapons, and money. In the violence and confusion that followed, the CIA helped him gain the support of many Guatemalans, even though none of them really knew who he was. Operation PB Success, just like its name, was a success. With a weak army and the people in uprising, Jacobo Arbenz was forced to resign, and America's puppet, Armas, happily took his place. The United Fruit Company had just gotten the American government to do their dirty work for them. Who cared if the new president was assassinated just 3 years after taking power? Or that he was succeeded by dictator after dictator? Armas had served his purpose, and United Fruit had gotten what they wanted. They had convinced the American government to overthrow a democratically elected president, all in the name of banana profits. But even that wouldn't last. After the Guatemalan coup, United Fruit's revenue slowly started to decline. It got so bad, by 1972, the company had to sell the last of the land it owned in Guatemala to stay in business. In the end, it had all been for nothing. United Fruit was forced into mergers and eventually re-emerged as Chiquita Brands International, which you can find in your local grocery store to this day. Today, Chiquita Brands controls around 29% of the global banana market. They're still the biggest banana producer out there. And even though they don't have as big of a monopoly as they used to, there's one thing that never changed: their willingness to commit crimes in the name of profit. In 2007, Chiquita Brands pled guilty to paying a designated Colombian terrorist organization $1.7 million in exchange for Chiquita keeping its land and operations in Colombia. The company has also been accused of helping these terrorist organizations smuggle drugs and guns around the world in exchange for protection. Even in the 21st century, even with the rebranding, Chiquita Brands still sticks to their United Fruit traditions. The CIA coup in Guatemala was based on the strategy of one of America's most successful covert operations in history, Operation Ajax. Carried out just 1 year before Guatemala, Operation Ajax had caused the overthrow of a democratic government in another country for almost exactly the same reasons, and that country was Iran. For years, Iran had been ruled by a king who answered directly to the British government. The king allowed Britain to take more than half of the country's oil and oil revenue, leaving regular Iranians dirt poor and without a single say in how their country was run. Just like America had puppet leaders around the world, the British had their very own profitable puppet, and everything went just as planned. Right until a guy by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh became Iran's new prime minister. You see, Mossadegh wasn't like the other Iranian prime ministers before him, who were scared of the king or the British and just did what they asked. He really loved the Iranian people and wanted to see them prosper. And just like Arbenz, he decided that a foreign government taking Iranian resources, land, and money for itself didn't sit right. So, he nationalized the Iranian oil industry. He changed the rules so that Iran, and not Britain, would make the most money from Iranian oil. It was again an act of war. Except this time, Britain didn't have the expertise to take Mossadegh out themselves, so they turned to America for help. With Eisenhower as president, it was as easy as calling Mossadegh a communist, and almost immediately, the CIA sprang into action. Just like in Guatemala, the CIA did everything in its power to paint Mossadegh as the bad guy, to make the people angry and confused, and to overthrow the only guy who genuinely had Iran's best interests at heart. Operation Ajax was a success. But there was something they overlooked. No one in the CIA or the American government had any idea what the consequences of this coup would be. Because unlike in Guatemala, the coup didn't just lead to a little fighting and bloodshed. It would change the direction of history forever. This one American coup, this one act of aggression, would sow the seeds of Middle Eastern terror. In fact, the majority of the violence, the majority of the bloodshed, the majority of the acts of terror against the West can be traced back to this one single event, the American coup of 1953 in Iran. But here's the thing, a YouTube video going in depth into these touchy subjects would get demonetized right away. So instead, we just released it as a private full-length documentary that's only available to members of this channel. It's already been age restricted, and members have been loving it. All you have to do to watch this documentary right now is hit the join button below. Once you sign up, you'll also have unlimited access to all our other documentaries on the release of the Bin Laden Papers, Jeffrey Epstein, MK Ultra, the CIA's mind control project, Monsanto, the company that owns the world's food supply, and much more in the future. It's the kind of stuff they should be teaching you in university about how the world works, but unlike university, you get all of this for just $5 a month. And there's a refund policy too, unlike most YouTube memberships. So if you join and you don't think it's worth it, email us within your first month of joining, and we will personally refund you for your first month. After your first month, there's no refund because a few bad apples decide to abuse this refund policy. Pause the video and click that join button below right now.
This story still boggles my mind every single time I go over it, so let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. And if you're new here, my name is Jake, and this is one of the biggest channels on YouTube for documentaries on money, power, war, and crime. So if you enjoyed this one, click that subscribe button below for more videos just like this multiple times every single week for free. Remember, you can follow me on Instagram for a chance to win $1,000 at Jake Tran. Not sure how much longer I'm going to be running this giveaway, so get in there while you can. But that's going to wrap it up. Stay dangerous out there, and I will see you guys in the next one.